Hello everybody, RJ here with People Have Spoken. Today is December 7th, and this is the News and Review. So in this video, I'll be going through all the articles that I shared on the People Have Spoken Facebook page. If you aren't following the Facebook page, please be sure to go find it on Facebook, follow it, and if you're watching this on YouTube, please consider looking at this on Facebook or Rumble, since I don't really like having to give any power to Google and the evil overlords over there. But if you found it there, then that's why I have it there, so that way people can find it more easily. But with no further ado, let's just jump into these first couple articles that we have. And man, microphone's going to get in the way here. So the first one up, and this is actually not an article. This is from the Federal Register, so it's a .gov website. And I'm going to read a portion here. It's actually something that was mentioned to me that happened. I couldn't find any articles reporting on this, but I think it's fairly important. It's another mandate that's going through. So this, and it might be a bit dry, but I want to read this anyway. This interim final rule with Commons IFC adds new provisions to the Head Start program performance standards to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus disease in Head Start programs. This IFC requires effective upon publication universal masking for all individuals 2 years of age and older, with some noted exceptions, and all Head Start staff, contractors whose activities involve contact with or providing direct service to children and families, and volunteers working in classrooms or directly with children to be vaccinated for the COVID-19 by January 31st, 2022. So this is another mandate. It's two things. It's a mask mandate. So it's mandating not only that the staff are going to be masked, but it's also mandating that the kids in these Head Start programs are also going to be masked, as well as a mandate for vaccination of the staff members. And it is baffling to me that this is still going through. This came through on November 30th. Every single one of these has been struck down by the courts. These mandates are not flying with the courts, but the federal government is still trying to push these through. The administration is still trying to push these through on people, and it's not slowing down in any way. And in this case, even having the mask mandates for kids as young as 2 years old. Now, this is something that I take very, very personally. So in some of my other videos, I may have mentioned that I have kids that are special needs. And one of my kids has speech apraxia. So this is where he has a very hard time understanding how to use his mouth in order to make speech. So he doesn't really talk. Like, he might say one word consistently. It's just extremely limited. No functional communication whatsoever. And one of the big problems that's caused this is that, and he's 4 years old, almost 5 years old. One of the big things that's caused this is the fact that through the past couple years, when he's gone through therapy to try and help him, the care providers have been wearing masks. And because of that, he can't see their mouth moving when that's the biggest thing that he needs to be able to see. When I speak to him, he'll often go and reach out and like touch my mouth to try and understand more of what's happening there. He doesn't even register that people are using their mouth to communicate when he's with these other care providers. And I think this is a really big issue. And it is open for public comments, so you can go on there and comment why this is bad, and call your U.S. senators and U.S. representatives and tell them that this is something that you really oppose. Do all that. But this is a very serious problem. This is something that I've personally experienced, how damaging it can be. Not to mention, of course, it's just another vaccine mandate and all the issues that arise from that. So very unhappy to see this. It's again another case of the federal government coming through trying to force these mandates on people that ultimately get struck down. And it's not about them actually not being struck down. It's about telling people, if you're not vaccinated, you can lose your job, and having this threat over people. So people just assume that they have to do this. So it's very nefarious. I'm really upset. I'm really unhappy seeing this happen. And we need to stop allowing these things to go through. All right, so moving on to the next article that we have here. And this is a headline. And this is from the Argus Leader. The South Dakota Governor Chrissy Noem files appeal brief in Planned Parenthood v. Noem. After last week's historic oral arguments in the Dobbs case, South Dakota is moving forward with our legal fight to protect unborn lives, Noem said on Twitter. I look forward to the day when all life, born and unborn, is protected by law. This litigation will help. The appeal in the case centers around South Dakota's anti-coercion abortion law requiring an abortion consultation with a pregnancy help center 72 hours before an abortion procedure. Now, I am very much pro-life, 100% pro-life, and I think that this law, I'm not kind of go back and forth on it, and we can have a whole discussion about this. But ultimately, I think that this whole situation is very simply a political ploy. So, Chrissy Noem, she knows that she is loved by, I shouldn't say loved by conservatives, but she knows that she's serving a very conservative state, that she needs to win over conservative voters to get conservative voters out there to vote for her. And if she can show that she's fighting for them, that she's really doing these things that they care about, that they're going to actually follow through on that. Now, in this particular case, there's one of two outcomes. Either she gets traction on this and she's successful, and they're able to look back and say, I should say she's able to look back and say, look, I was able to get this accomplished as governor. I'm a great governor. You should go and vote for me again. Or she's going to go and they strike it down. It's unsuccessful. It doesn't turn up anything. And she can come back and say, look, they're fighting against us. They really don't like us. And if you want to have this happen, I'm the only one out there fighting for this. And no matter how it turns out, it's a political win for her. She can turn it to her advantage. And so, yes, I mean, it's by and large a good thing that this is happening for people who are particularly pro-life. I don't know about the way it's all put together. That's, again, a separate discussion. But frankly, I think that most of the things that she's doing in regards to this whole thing with abortion and how she's trying to approach it, I think most of it is just a part of her campaign in order to be reelected governor next year. But again, I could be wrong on that, and I'd love to talk to her about that. But I'll go and continue on. And the next article we have here is Haugaard. Noem should reimburse taxpayers for sauna. And this is actually a quote from Haugaard's campaign here. Chrissy Noem has spent enough of the taxpayers' money on herself. I am calling on Governor Noem to pay back the taxpayer for this vanity purchase, as well as for unknown costs of its installation. For someone who has raised over $10 million for her campaign, there is no reason why taxpayers should have to pay for these unnecessary expenses. Steve Haugaard campaign press release 2021. So, to give some bit of context here about what's all happening. So there was some reports that came out that Chrissy Noem has spent, I think it was $60,000 or some, I can't remember the exact numbers, and I don't have them written down, but she spent quite a bit of money on various things like rugs and chandeliers, and a sauna is the big one that he's talking about here for the governor's mansion. And I actually came across an article yesterday, and I was talking about this, and in that article, even though it was anti-Noem, it was still saying that this is comparable to what other governors have done. And the author of that article was actually more frustrated that, well, this is during COVID, and which is only even half true. So I think that the way that is being handled is completely missing the point. And even with this whole thing, I did a calculation. We're talking about the sauna. The sauna itself was $8,100. Now, I don't know necessarily the reason of why there needs to be a sauna or what the justification is, and we have the discussion. But in the grand scheme of things, the budget for South Dakota is, I believe, $5 billion. So to put this in perspective, it's 0.00005% or whatever the actual amount is going to be. It's such a small portion of the taxpayers' budget. Now, I get it that any amount that is being paid out is significant, and we don't want these funds to be misappropriated. But there's so many other areas where way more money than $8,000 is being misused and misappropriated, and there's all these shady things going on with it. And so In the same way that I believe that the whole situation with the abortion case in Kristi Noem is more about winning re-election, I think this whole thing that Steve Haugaard is trying to do is also about trying to get elected. He's going and running against Kristi Noem for the gubernatorial race again in 2022. He's trying to take her seat. And so going over and saying, hey, look, you have these expenses. Like, you bought a sauna for $8,000. Oh, that's a really bad thing. Who else here has a sauna for $8,000? And the reality is, Kristi Noem, again, if she goes and pays the $8,000, like, fine, I'll reimburse it. It's not a big deal. Then first of all, she's going to look like she's this extremely wealthy person that's able to just pay $8,000, and that will be used against her. It's also going to be framed that, oh, look, I had this victory. I forced her to go and pay this back. This is why I'm fighting for you and fighting against corruption. And again, as she goes and fights back and says, no, this isn't something that's normal. Here's the reason why. It's something that can so easily be used to just frame it up against her. I don't think this is a big issue. It's not something I particularly care about. I think there's such bigger issues. If it was a case that someone was going and actually fighting against the mandates, they were setting up a civilian defense force in the state of South Dakota, doing a lot of these things where they're cutting back the budget so we're not dependent on the federal government, doing all these things that I want to see happen in the state. I don't care if you want to buy an $80,000 sauna at that case. Let's try and focus on actually solving things and what our plans are to fix things, instead of just pointing and saying, well, this person spent a couple dollars here. So I don't think it's nearly as big of an issue as it's being made out to be. There's a lot bigger issues that we need to be concerned about. Again, I'm not favoring Noem or Steve here. I've gone through on both of them and have pointed out how I think they're just using these issues as ways to win their campaigns. But that's why I'm here. I just want to make sure people are aware of what's actually happening, and let's put this into context. All right, going on to the next story here. McConnell pitches GOP on new strategy to raise debt limit. And this is from Politico.com. This is more on the national news side, but we'll read this here. We all know the debt limit has to be raised, and we know the Democrats are going to be delivering the votes to do it. The question is, what's the process? Said Senate Minority Whip John Thune. McConnell's top deputy. I know we've got to raise the debt limit, and I have no intention of voting to raise the debt limit if we enable or allow a process that enables the Democrats to do it. Again, I'm going to wait and see what the leader has to say. So, I don't want to raise the debt limit. I disagree with this. I don't like the idea where he says, we all know the debt limit has to be raised. Like, is that how we solve our problems here? Is that how Americans should be solving their problems? Oh, I'm running out of money. I'm overspending, so I'm just going to keep bumping up the credit limit on my credit cards and keep outspending it because I can figure it out later. No, this is what's causing a lot of the problems that we're facing in America right now, is this kind of attitude. And yes, I realize not raising the debt ceiling is going to have, we can't make certain financial responsibilities there. It's going to lower our credit rating. And it puts into a lot of questions about America's economy. Look, America's economy is in a really bad situation right now. It should be reflected like that. In the same way that a normal American, everyday Joe, if they start making bad financial decisions and they get in a tight situation and their credit score gets destroyed because they're not paying back their debts and they're suffering there, then other lenders are going to want to know that in the same way that it would apply to America. And again, I am no fan of the federal government. I'm all for getting rid of the federal government. And if this makes it one step closer, I'm not in favor of saying we just need to raise it because we need to raise it. So I really dislike John Thune's perspective on this, and I hope he retires and that we can get someone that actually represents my interests in there to replace him. But anyway, that's all I have for this day's news and review. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again soon.